Councillor Bamforth. I'm not aware of any other apologies.
There's no further apologies, but Councillors Cunningham, Devlin and Wallace aren't on the call just now.
Thank you, Sharon. And so from any declarations of interest? No? Okay. So attending from Police Scotland, we have Chief Superintendent Mark Sutherland, Divisional Commander and Chief Inspector Alan Gray, Area Commander for East Renfrewshire. And we're also pleased to have in attendance as an observer Michelle Grant, our Community Inspector. So welcome to Michelle and Police Scotland team. And from Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, we have David McCarry, Area Commander for East Renfrewshire and Inverclyde, and Alan Coftree, Group Commander for East Renfrewshire, and welcome Scottish Fire and Rescue Service. Just before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to recognise that this will be Caroline Innes's last Police Cabinet with us.
Oh no.
Yeah, sorry, it's true. Caroline will be retiring from East Renfrewshire Council in January after 37 years public service, a number of which have been actively growing and nurturing community planning in East Renfrewshire, and in particular the successful partnerships we currently enjoy with both Police Scotland and Scottish Fire and Rescue Service. Caroline's contribution has been so valuable to all partners, and her keen knowledge and ever calm manner will be missed by many. With Caroline's departure on the horizon, we also have in attendance Louise Pringle, who will be the new Director of Business Operations and Partnerships from 2022. Corporate and Community Services will change its name at that same time. And Louise takes up her role in February and looks forward to continuing the great partnership working with both Police and Fire Cabinet. So welcome to Louise. And with that, we'll move on to Police Scotland's report, if that's okay.
Thank you, Chair, for the warm welcome, as always, into the East Renfrewshire Police and Fire Cabinet. I suppose I would start by echoing your words round about Caroline. I know that Caroline has closely supported probably more area commanders in East Renfrewshire than she would care to remember, all of whom speak exceptionally highly of the work ethic, the support, and actually just the personal respect that they have for Caroline and the way that she goes about her business. So from Police Scotland, I would formally record our thanks also. Moving on to the report itself, I don't intend to say too much this year, but I will remain open for questions as always in relation to broader matters affecting the Greater Glasgow Division, whether that be COP26, the festive period, and other challenges that we have and continue to face ongoing. I think in relation to the report that's before the committee today, obviously it refers to our Q2 period, which was July to September 21. And as always, Alan will set out in more detail that this was against a backdrop of restrictions under the pandemic being eased, and that brought about some real challenges for us in policing. It was a real period of adjustment for us, both internally in terms of delivering policing services and externally. One of the kind of biggest planning operations out with COP26 actually took place within the division, when we had to plan and deliver Playground Festival, Transmit Festival and the annual Boyne procession within Greater Glasgow, all within a 3-month period, each of which can take a sizable amount of months on its own to deliver. So whilst adjusting our processes and procedures, it was a very challenging time for us, and one that thankfully ultimately went well, and all of those events were delivered safely, and we continued to respond in an appropriate and dynamic manner to members of the public who were requiring policing services. I think I would call out the work done by Alan, Michelle, and importantly the wider partners across East Renfrewshire round about the Safe East Renfrewshire Summer Plan. I think that was a particular success this year, and particularly given some of the weather that we have, the amount of open spaces, the Picket Law in Eaglesham, and some of the other kind of open water areas that required a lot of support, both locally from the East Renfrewshire team, but also showed the benefit of East Renfrewshire being connected into Greater Glasgow and us being able to move resource out into East Renfrewshire to support that, and also thereafter to draw on national assets from wider Police Scotland, which Alan will come on to and discuss a wee bit more of. Antisocial behaviour and public nuisance is down significantly in the report, and again Alan will cover that. And whilst I welcome that, obviously, as do all members of the community, I am realistic that a lot of our previous calls under the COVID arrangements and the pandemic sat within antisocial behaviour and public nuisance calls in terms of people who were breaching restrictions. So that will be partly why that is down so significantly, but I do hope and believe there is also a collective partnership element in terms of driving that down through that safe East End summer plan that was so successful. And so again, my thanks to yourself, Chair, to Cabinet members for the ongoing support that I know Alan and Michelle and the rest of the team get. I believe the relationship in East Renfrewshire is a very strong one, and everybody's trying to achieve the same goals across East Renfrewshire. And as we look ahead, after a really busy COP26 period for us, we now have a position where locally the East Renfrewshire team are very much focused on delivering a safe festive period, picking up some real priorities for us round about some of the growing concerns round about fraud and online crime. And moving into next year, we will continue to support the community planning arrangements in East Renfrewshire, whilst further pushing forward our own public health approach to policing that we have in Greater Glasgow, along with the violence reduction that we continue to try and push. So that's it from me, Chair, in terms of opening remarks, and I'll now pass to Chief Inspector Alan Gray, if you're content just to introduce the report in some more detail.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, sir, and thank you, Chair. Thank you for your introduction and for the opportunity to present this policing plan update for Q2, the second quarter of the financial year 2021 to 22. Thank you also for allowing Inspector Michelle Grant, our Community Inspector, to join as an observer today, and also for agreeing to allow this Cabinet to be rescheduled to support our local response to COP26, which Mr Sutherland has commented on and which I will discuss in February's Cabinet covering Q3. I would also like to echo the thanks for Caroline Innes' support for my role. Fire colleagues and I have plans to formally acknowledge this support prior to Caroline's retirement in another forum, and we look forward to working with Louise moving forwards. This update directly relates to the East Renfrewshire Policing Plan for 2020 to 23 and highlights those areas of most concern in our communities. It emphasises our commitment to address those concerns and will, I hope, very clearly this quarter demonstrate our ongoing commitment to achieving this through a partnership approach in East Renfrewshire. As I have previously said, I'll start, if I may, by providing a brief timeline of the changing picture of the COVID response through Q2, which I hope provides some valuable context. On 19th July, Scotland moved to level 0, which saw customers no longer requiring to book tour time slots in bars and restaurants. Physical distancing in public places reduced to 1 metre, and numbers at weddings and funerals increased to 200. By the 9th of August, East Renfrewshire and the rest of Scotland had moved to beyond level 0, which saw the return of large-scale gatherings such as sporting and music events. Our officers have continued to work throughout all these phases, and I'm pleased to say that although we've experienced some spikes in COVID-related absences locally, these have been minimal, and testament to the control measures our supervisors and staff have implemented and supported. This report highlights challenges, positive outcomes and good work carried out in the second quarter of the year. I'll turn firstly to acquisitive crime. Overall crimes of dishonesty were lower than for the same period in 2020 and some 16% lower than the previous 5-year average. Domestic housebreakings are very much in line with 2020 data, however remains significantly lower, some 30% than the previous 5-year average. In line with Scottish and UK crime trends, we have continued to see increases in online fraud. Our Economic Crime Unit continue to support local officers with expert advice to progress such investigations, and we continue to raise awareness of new and emerging scams via local social media and also via the Police Scotland website to alert our residents. We pleasingly continue to see very good examples of local use of our banking protocol. This protocol is instigated when bank staff dealing with a lifetime transaction are concerned that a potentially vulnerable customer may be withdrawing a significant sum of money, and that's a significant amount for that individual, against their will. This allows our officers to be quickly deployed to attend the bank, ensure the well-being of the potential victim, and investigate the matter. In early September, a 91-year-old lady was victim of courier fraud, whereby she was persuaded to attend in person at a bank in East Wren with the intention of withdrawing £3,500 in cash to be handed over to a representative who would attend to collect this. Despite being told not to divulge the story to staff in the bank, they were sufficiently alert to the risk and contacted police. We were able to swiftly attend and elicit the precise circumstances, allowing further preventative measures to be offered and wider investigations to be progressed. Moving on to public protection, sexual crimes have decreased on both 2020 and 5-year average data, and our detection rate so far this year is just under 70%, significantly higher than our 5-year average of 45%. While such a reduction in crimes is welcome, we continue to work with partner agencies to provide support to victims so they have the confidence to come forward and report ongoing and historical incidents. As highlighted in last quarter's report, Child Abuse Investigation Unit colleagues, both from Greater Glasgow Police Division and from our national unit, provide considerable expertise in progressing investigations relating to online sexual offences, where victims may be within and out with our policing area. Following on from an extensive police investigation, a 76-year-old man from Barrhead appeared at Paisley Sheriff Court in early August and pled guilty to charges relating to the possession of and distribution of indecent images of children, which had been secretly obtained at numerous locations across Scotland. Thousands of images were recovered following a search of his home under warrant, and many were shown to have been shared on a paedophile website. These divisional and national units also have the safeguarding of victims at the heart of their response. In relation to domestic abuse, whilst we attended slightly fewer domestic incidents compared to the same period in 2020, this represents a 5% increase on the previous 5-year average. As discussed at previous cabinets, locally we regularly receive reports of non-criminal activity which relate to minor disputes and arguments between ex-partners, often relating to access to children, etc. Year-to-date domestic abuse incidents reflect this in relation to reports where associated crimes were recorded, with this figure dropping to 37.4% against a 5-year average of 45.1%. Whilst these conversion rate figures are in line with trends evidenced elsewhere in the Greater Glasgow area in Q2, and whilst we always welcome and encourage early engagement in relation to such disputes, which provide opportunities to clarify guidance to both parties and which may prevent escalation of disputes, this is nonetheless an area we are closely monitoring. We continue to ensure robust daily review of our performance in this area, both locally and with the support of our Domestic Abuse Investigation Unit colleagues. This ensures officers consider all investigative opportunities available to them when dealing with such reports. Moving on to drug dealing and misuse, year-to-date figures for Q2 show that we recorded a total of 71 drug-related offences. While this was 13.4% fewer than last year, we saw an increase in the number of offences relating to the supply of drugs, to a figure 22.45% higher than the 5-year average. We continue to work proactively in this area, where we are committed to impact on the damaging effects which the supply of illegal substances have in our communities. We also continue to work closely with our colleagues in East Renfrewshire's Drug and Alcohol Partnership across a range of issues in support of our public health approach to policing. The link between addictions, mental health issues and trauma are well documented, and police officers often encounter individuals at their most vulnerable and in a time of extreme need. As detailed in previous updates to Cabinet, we are working with ADP colleagues to explore the best means of signposting such vulnerable members of our communities to local health and social care and other forms of support. I am delighted to say that as a result of this close partnership working, following a successful funding bid, ADP have agreed to deliver an innovative and bespoke mental health training programme package for a cadre of our response officers in East Wren to enhance their skill set and support that local signposting. This package is being developed by SAMH, the Scottish Association for Mental Health, and I will keep Cabinet updated on its progress. In terms of violent crime, whilst minor assaults have increased slightly above last year's data, they remain below the 5-year average. Serious assaults have remained relatively static and low against both previous year and 5-year average data. Robberies have also remained low and static in the year to date. We have this year also been looking closely at assaults on emergency service workers, following an increasing national trend in such reports, which have been well documented through the COVID response. Figures for such offences, whilst remaining relatively low, have doubled in East Rhine over the last year and have exclusively involved minor assaults on police officers. As previously reported to Cabinet, the Force carried out a national public consultation earlier this year in relation to potential wider use of body-worn video cameras, which have proven successful in reducing such incidents elsewhere. Meantime, the well-being of our officers remains paramount, and we continue to ensure the provision of appropriate safety training for all operational officers, with medical and welfare support offered to officers who are the victim of such attack in the course of exercising their duties. Moving on to antisocial behaviour and disorder, as members will recall from previous cabinets, the link between youth disorder and antisocial behaviour was identified as one of particular importance for police and partners. Following the relaxation of restrictions after the lockdown in December 2020, in Q4, January, February, March of 2021, we recorded a significant spike in such reports, with a number of high-profile incidents attracting media attention across the local authority area. Notwithstanding related COVID recording practices, this spike was greatly beyond normal seasonal trends over the previous 5 years, and anticipating a summer period of 2021, which would see more residents holidaying at home and wishing to enjoy East Rhine's many parks and open spaces, this data caused concern. As discussed in September's Cabinet, significant joint planning work was accordingly coordinated during Q1 under the Safe East Rhine Group, involving partners such as Police Scotland, East Renfrewshire Council Community Safety, including wardens, youth workers, education, Scottish Fire and Rescue, British Transport Police, Scottish Water, to develop a Safe East Rhine summer plan. This plan was implemented on the 10th of July and ran until the 13th of September. Throughout this period, partners participated in twice-weekly planning meetings to share information and intelligence and plan our response based on such factors as the previous week's experience, predicted weather and other significant events taking place in East Rhine and the surrounding areas. A public communication strategy was led by East Rhine Council Communications team and shared by all partners. Safety was a key message, and I'm pleased and relieved to say that we saw no tragedies on our waters and reservoirs in East Rhine, which sadly was not the case in other parts of Scotland and the UK during what was a particularly good summer in terms of weather. Our information sharing with Scottish Fire and Rescue, East Rhine Council and Scottish Water to support local safety messaging, including targeted leaflet drops from Scottish Fire and Rescue colleagues, and the summer plan model we employed is being adopted by other council areas. We saw no significant disorder or violence in our parks and open spaces, no reported sexual offences, and the trend of increased antisocial behaviour and disorder witnessed in Q4 was reversed, declining slightly in Q1 and more dramatically in Q2, with data for these crimes actually falling to its lowest level in Q2, looking at the previous 5-year average. Whilst there are undoubtedly some factors of the COVID response, as the Divisional Commander has stated, and data recording measures adopted therein provide an impact here, nonetheless, the Safe East Rhine Group have reviewed our collective response over the summer as a success, with the template now provided being used to implement a winter festive safety plan and also being adopted by other council areas. Moving on to the second page of the report, I would just wish to highlight a few pieces of further good work carried out by our officers across the broad range of their duties. In relation to violent crime, robberies thankfully remain low, and we currently have a 100% detection rate. In late August, a robbery was reported at shop premises in Busby, which received a significant amount of local publicity. Our response officers were quickly dispatched, supported by our Air Support Unit helicopter and Dog Branch resources, and an 18-year-old man was quickly traced nearby and subsequently charged with the crime. In early September, a 19-year-old man was the victim of a street robbery in the Giffnock area. Through rigorous investigations supported by our CID colleagues, 3 suspects were linked to another similar crime in Ayrshire, and all 3 have now been arrested and charged with both robberies. In relation to crimes of dishonesty, we have robust processes in place to identify developing crime trends, with investigations and intelligence reviewed on a daily basis and our resources tasked to tackle local issues. During September, a spate of thefts and attempted thefts occurred in the Newton Mearns area. Inquiries were linked and investigated by our local problem-solving team officers, and a mixture of good old-fashioned policing and excellent use of new technologies was employed. Door-to-door inquiries captured footage from Ring doorbell devices, with appeals via social media also identifying additional victims. One of our campus officers subsequently identified a suspect via CCTV footage, and a sheriff's warrant was obtained and subsequently executed. A 43-year-old man was interviewed and charged with a total of 12 crimes, with a number of victims later reunited with their property. Regarding our focus on domestic abuse, adult protection and child protection, I'm always struck by a range of duties our officers have to undertake, and on the evening of the 2nd of September, response policing officers on patrol in the Barrhead area were stopped by members of the public to report a 2-year-old child having fallen out of the window of a 3rd-floor flat. Officers immediately alerted Scottish Ambulance Service colleagues and dealt professionally and sensitively with a very challenging and traumatic scene until these colleagues arrived. Following a stay of several days in hospital, the child is recovering from her injuries. A subsequent police inquiry was carried out, working closely with East Renfrewshire Health and Social Care colleagues, and a 34-year-old man has since been charged with an offence under the Children and Young Persons Act. After such incidents, we always ensure our officers are offered welfare and support from trained colleagues should they require any counselling. In terms of a focus on young people, our campus officers have worked closely with staff and pupils throughout the COVID pandemic. Health and wellbeing impacts of the pandemic on young people, both physical and mental, have been a concern for all partners, and these concerns have been shared by members at previous cabinets. During the summer months, our campus officers secured funding from our Divisional Commander's Local Partnership Fund to support a summer youth project for a group of 14 young people identified in liaison with East Renfrewshire Education pastoral teaching staff. These young people were recognised as being worthy of inclusion through a variety of wellbeing needs. Through the summer holidays, 2 days per week, campus officers and participants took part in a range of activities, providing these young people with opportunities and experiences they would otherwise not have had, developing valuable personal and life skills. This programme was fully supportive of the aims of both our Safe East Rend Summer Plan and our public health approach to policing, and the officers have been nominated for an award for their innovative efforts. Chair, thank you again for the opportunity to present this report. This concludes my review, and I'm happy to take any questions you or other members may have.
Thank you very much for that report, Alan. I'd just like to say a couple of words about it first, and then we'll open for questions, if that's okay. It's a very comprehensive report, and I think setting the context of the report is very helpful as well. And it gives the breadth and depth of work that you are actually doing, some awfully traumatic events for some of your officers as well. Again, that gives it's the darker side of humanity that you see, that you guys are the first to see often. I think one of the things that we're seeing in general is that recovery is a process in itself. We're not suddenly going to go back to where we were before COVID started. That's going to take quite a while for society to recover as a whole, so to speak. But thank you very much for the report and the whole public health approach. The work with COP26, and there's no resting on the laurels here. Christmas is coming. By a humbug, not quite. But I'll open it up to questions. Thanks very much for the report so far. And Councillor Lafferty has a question.
It's a question for Chief Inspector Gray. I'm one of the representatives in Busby Ward, and there's a vulnerable young lady there who's probably well known to your officers at Giffnock, certainly well known to myself. But she has an inquiry that a car has been apparently abandoned in Busby, in the village. It's been there for about 5 months. During that time, the vulnerable young lady said to me that the police have called on her 5 times to ask if she knew who owned the car. I understood that the police would, through the police national computer or DVLA, you could establish the ownership quite quickly. So I was just a bit concerned that maybe, and I have the details here that I can pass to you later, Alan. But maybe
yes, I was going to suggest, Councillor Lafferty, if I can maybe call you after this meeting to get those get those details, and I'll certainly make investigations into that and get back to you out with this meeting, if that's in order.
That's ideal. Thank you very much, Alan.
I'll contact you after the meeting, Councillor.
Thank you. And Councillor Grant?
Thank you, Chairman. There's been a lot recently in news reports about drug problems and deaths, etc., in Scotland. So the drug issue is a big issue, a very big issue. But the report that you have here is looking better than it's been, but it doesn't in any way give us an impression of what kind of problems we seem to be hearing in the general news reports. And I'm wondering, are we immune to what we're hearing as a general report, or just lucky, or quite what? Because it doesn't quite, if you read that report of yours, Alan, it doesn't quite stack up with the headlines that we read and hear about the drug issues in Scotland. So why is it we don't seem to be having the problems that are generally announced for Scotland? Or are we just lucky, or quite what? I'd be interested in your remarks.
Thank you, Councillor. Certainly, obviously, we've reported in this quarter of increased detections for drug supply. In relation to, obviously, there's been a significant amount of reporting in relation to drugs deaths. And I'm wondering if that's what you're alluding to. We certainly have low figures in relation to drug deaths. That would not normally be recorded in this report. However, just for reassurance, we do work very closely, as I say, with Alcohol and Drugs Partnership, and very much in support of the initiatives that they are developing there. I wouldn't want to steal their thunder, but certainly they have linked into funding to support and access to an overdose response team, which we often see that an indication of a recent overdose heightens vulnerability for an individual. So access to support is absolutely key there. And that's something that East End Council, Health and Social Care are progressing, and the Alcohol Drug Partnership are progressing. So we work very closely with them, and that data is shared more widely. But certainly in terms of drugs deaths, we are lower in the East Renfrewshire area. But obviously that supply figure has increased over the last quarter, and we are very much proactive in that area. So we're certainly not immune from a drugs problem, but as you'll see from the data, we are very proactive in that area. Hopefully that answers some of your questions, Councillor.
Well, thank you for that. It's an issue that obviously we're very keen to support and make sure that we get the best results we can. It's a worry. It's a real worry, and I'm sure people in this area are as worried as the rest of Scotland. Thank you.
Thank you. And Chief Superintendent Sutherland, please.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor. A very good question and good point well made about the level of concern around about drugs deaths that exist right across Scotland. Across Greater Glasgow, we have our own drug strategy, which is partnership focused, obviously, but looks at the wider response from a policing perspective around about drugs deaths. But the update I thought might be useful to share is the naloxone pilot, which you may have heard some stuff about, which is in operation in 3 test areas across Scotland, the East End of Glasgow being one of them within Greater Glasgow Division. That pilot has now come to an end and is under review and evaluation. I have to say the early signs are that we used naloxone to assist members of the public who were in opiate overdose far more times than any of us would have thought we would, and seems to have been a very positive pilot. And after the evaluation, which I think is due to report in February, there'll then be a decision taken as to whether that will then be expanded out across the rest of Police Scotland, which would include East Renfrewshire. And I, for one, I'm certainly hopeful that that will be the case based on what we saw from the 3 test pilot areas. So I just thought it might be useful to hear that update on naloxone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Grant, just one additional point that in terms of our partnership working with East End Council on that, we have peer mentors within our custody suites across Glasgow Division, and that's individuals who have lived experience of addiction issues. We are working with the council to see how they can best link in with peer navigators, which East End Council are developing. And again, that's people with lived experience who work in the community and signpost these individuals to the support services that they require. So again, very much ongoing work in this area, but a very positive environment, I would say, which links into, as the divisional commander has said, those wider support mechanisms across the division.
Chairman, if you don't mind, if I could just finish up. What I'm wondering is all of this sort of wound up in social circumstances more than anything else, or does that not really play a part? You know, I'm concerned that areas where there are appearing to be social deprivation, is that bigger issue than the whole drug problem? I mean, obviously it's all wound up together for the whole country, but is it because of social issues that you're having to focus more highly on particular areas?
I'm happy to answer. I don't know if the commander was coming in there, or do you want me to answer, sir?
Not when you go, Alan. I'm sorry, I was quite happy for you to pick that up.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, councillor. So yeah, very much we link in, obviously in terms of drug supply, that information comes from intelligence that we deal with through our intelligence hubs, and invariably it's our local problem solving teams who will be involved in what I would say is drug turns, for use of want of a better phrase, to obviously deal with suppliers in terms of general possession of drugs. That can come from any particular call that officers are dealing with, or obviously intelligence led as well. In terms of the mapping of that, we have a kind of widespread use of different drug types. I think certainly in terms of a greater Glasgow perspective, mentioned that drug strategy that the divisional commander was talking about at a recent meeting there, and we've certainly seen a change in the types of drug types which are being used, and probably concerningly, that the cost of drugs has not risen with inflation. So actually you can now buy purer drugs at a greater quantity for actually cheaper amount. So that's a concerning trend. We've also seen different types of drugs being used and available. So it's not specifically geographically located. I think it's fair to say that it's wider across all societies and all members. Obviously in deprived areas we can have a greater focus in some crime types, but it's certainly not simply a focus to those areas with deprivation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chief Inspector, I've got two questions. I'll just ask them both and then let you answer if that's okay. One of the questions is about violent crime, and there have been 35 assaults on emergency workers, which is more than double last year. So are there any specific measures being taken to protect our partners within emergency services? And the other one is about sexual offences. So the detection rate is significantly higher than the 5-year average. It's 50% up in that almost, or about that. So that's very encouraging, but is there a specific reason for the improved success in detecting sexual offences?
Thank you, Chair. So in terms of those assaults on emergency service workers, so far this year they've exclusively been in relation to assaults, minor assaults, I would state, on police officers, but obviously we have sound relationships and reporting mechanisms with our colleagues in Scottish Fire and Rescue, Scottish Ambulance Service, should they receive attacks on their officers as well. Through the fireworks response this year, which I'll mention briefly here, as it will be covered in in Q3 report. We work closely with Fire and Rescue because they obviously have had previous instances where fire appliances and firefighters have come under attack. So we work closely through that response plan to support that and prevent such incidents. In terms of I obviously covered the officer safety training for our officers and the welfare and medical support. So I think in terms of it is part of a wider national trend of report in that area, increasing reports. I think there's also potentially better reporting from our officers than there previously have been. So that's welcome that they report those matters in order that we can deal with them appropriately. So a number of factors involved in there, but hopefully a bit of reassurance that we are monitoring those. And I think developments potentially such as body-worn videos have shown in other areas a potential ability to reduce such assaults and impact on those kind of behaviours. And we shall see how those develop from a force-wide perspective, but we would certainly be supported of that implementation in East Renfrewshire where that progressed. In terms of, I'll pass over to the Divisional Commander at that point. I see his hands raised.
Thanks, Alan. If you're finished, I was going to pick up on the sexual offence detection rate, which I can probably give a slightly more informed answer on. So, Chair, I suppose the answer to that is it always is difficult to really put your finger on exactly what has driven the difference. I think what's important for us is to make sure that we're in the best place that we can be to support victims who come forward with confidence to report sexual offences. What we have done is we have been, over the last 18 months, redesigning how we deliver that service for victims across Greater Glasgow. So colleagues in the Cabinet will be aware of the introduction of the Domestic Abuse Investigation Unit. Unfortunately, we see some sexual offences being reported within that environment. We've also introduced a non-recent sexual offences team within our Public Protection Forum, and that provides a dedicated team of officers who are able to focus on victims who have at a different point in time found the confidence to come forward and report offences from some time ago, and allows dedicated and skilled and experienced officers to tackle those types of offences, which are actually very often the most difficult to detect, because clearly you have no forensic opportunities, or very often no forensic opportunities at that point in time. And we've also redesigned the shift patterns within our public protection environment, so we now have fewer officers on the night shift, which increases our capacity during day and late shift hours, where we see the main course of our business being delivered. So I'm hopeful that in the way that we are delivering services, that is having a contributing factor. But I think also the wider partnership, the level of support that's out there now for victims, and allowing an increase in that confidence for victims to come forward, everyone playing their part, all contributes to what is an improved detection rate, and it's one that we'll keep a close eye on moving forward.
That's great. Thank you very much for a comprehensive answer. Councillor Wallace.
Thank you. Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah. I heard you mention earlier on about these Ringo devices that had helped you solve sort of robbery issue. Can I ask, are you finding these devices are very popular or becoming more and more popular? And whether you would advise that householders seriously consider installing one of these? And just as an add-on, I have heard that there are some privacy issues where neighbours have maybe complained that just the angle that these are at, that they may be picking up movements or whatever from neighbours or from passers-by. Could you maybe just sort of expand on the benefits of these devices, whether we should get them and whether there's anything we have to watch out for when we are installing them? Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace. Certainly, I'm happy to potentially even discuss off table with you to give a bit more information. We do have support as well from East Wren Council around training standards. So, for example, they've been very useful in other areas, and they are offered where we have instances of bogus traders. So for vulnerable members of our community, we have had good returns from that. It was certainly a really valuable in that particular investigation that we discussed around the spate of thefts in Newton Mearns in terms of getting that that CCTV coverage, which ultimately supported identification of that individual. In terms of the guidance around specific CCTV cameras, very rarely from doorbell cameras we would say would be the angle would cause issues. We do have some reports that will come to us or some requests, and those can be from members of the public or also domestic premises and other premises. A church recently inquired on our community safety colleagues and partnerships will happily carry out security reviews and provide advice on that, and they have done that very recently in relation to one of our churches to ensure that the angle of the camera was not going to cause any issues to neighbours, but would provide the security at that church. So we do have those support services available to members of the public, but certainly I would say unlikely from doorbell that we would have that issues of privacy breaches.
Okay, thank you for that. That's good.
Chair, you're on.
Let's come off mute and say that again. Thank you. Anybody else for any more questions? No. Okay, so thank you very much to Police Scotland for another comprehensive report and for briefing us fully on all our questions and for the great work that you do. And I hope at some point you have a nice holiday. I'm going to hand over now to David McCarry, the Area Commander for East Renfrewshire, and Inverclyde to start the Scottish Fire and Rescue Performance Report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. I'll bring Alan in a second to go through the report itself. Just probably a few opening remarks from myself. We'd mentioned COP26 and the successful conclusion of that, and that incident, that event rather, passed largely without incident. I know colleagues on the call from Police Scotland won't take credit for this, but I'll, on their behalf, give them a bit of credit. Be in no doubt that was largely due to not just the logistics around the event itself, but the way in which it was policed and observations of myself and my teams across that. And whilst that didn't necessarily affect East Renfrewshire in the first instance in terms of the event itself, what was going on behind the scenes was ensuring that business as usual response was there from police and fire. So I just wanted to put on record my thanks to Police Scotland for what was a very successful event. Bonfire night as well was a challenge for us. That was a concurrent event within the COP26 period, but again, the deployment model that we put together with colleagues in Police Scotland was successful. Alan had mentioned about attacks on emergency service workers, and yes, we did see some activity across Scotland with regards to attacks on our fire crews. I'm grateful. It's a rather bizarre benchmark to set, but we had no attacks across our 3 local authority areas, including East Renfrewshire. One thing that we probably haven't mentioned at Cabinet before is that I'm pleased to announce that we now have a partnership with Scottish Ambulance Service. We now have an emergency vehicle from the Scottish Ambulance Service running out of Clarkson Fire Station. The crews are embedding themselves within the station as we speak. We were waiting for the conclusion of COP26, and there's some vehicle movements around Scottish Ambulance Service, but we do plan to have a formal launch of that partnership, and I'll update Cabinet as to what that may look like in the future. But a really positive step, and hopefully something that assists people across East Renfrewshire. Thanks to Cabinet members and the local authority for contributing to our UFAS consultation. That will now go to the board for a decision next year, and we will implement what that response will look like. But it's important to note that any change to the response to UFAS will be communicated both nationally and through Cabinet members to let them know exactly what that looks like. But it will be a really positive step, because what it will do in effect, and Cabinet will see in the report, the amount of resource that we put towards unwanted fire alarm signals. And if we can take those firefighters, instead of deploying to these false alarms, and really use them better within the communities, use them better within people's homes, and allow them to look wider at home safety in general, then that's going to be a really positive step. But as I say, any response model to unwanted fire alarm signals in the future will obviously be discussed both with businesses and both with Cabinet members. And last but not least, a personal thanks to Caroline from a personal perspective. It's been brief as the area commander. However, I know Alan and a lot of my colleagues beforehand have felt very supported by Caroline. Cabinet were kind enough to let me reflect on my own mum's 30+ years in Eastwood District Council and then East Renfrewshire, so I know only too well what a commitment she's put towards the local authority. So thanks on behalf of the Fire and Rescue Service, and I know Alan had said that we will recognise this in another setting out with Cabinet. And also a welcome to Louise. I look very much forward to working with you in the future, Louise. And with that, Chair, I'll hand over to Alan.
Thank you.
Thanks, David. Good morning, everybody. Hope everybody's well. So, Chair, if it's okay with yourself, firstly, I'd just like to record my thanks to Caroline, who's certainly been a support to me when I came into my new role probably about 16 months ago. Really enjoyed working with you, Caroline, and thanks very much for all the support. I'd also like to welcome Louise, and Louise, just to say, really looking forward to working with you as we move forward. So moving on to my report, thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to present a performance report for Q2, covering the period from the 1st of July to the 30th of September 21. So the report measures the performance against our key priorities within our local plan for East Renfrewshire and the challenges that we encounter within the communities within. It also highlights our continued commitment to address these challenges and the positive work carried out by our service along with our partners to resolve the issues that we encounter. As a service, we're continuing to adapt and flex to meet with the ongoing challenges of the COVID pandemic, and we're continuing with our recovery strategy and implementing business as usual where possible to keep our property and fleet portfolio COVID secure. We're continuing to maintain maximum resilience and will continue to adjust our infrastructure to meet with the needs of our communities as we move forward. We have recently concluded our initial commitment to COP26, as Area Commander alluded to there, which as a service was very successful. However, the post-COP26 debrief process is very much still active and will continue well into 2022 to identify areas of good practice and any areas for improvement to support our ongoing commitment to our climate response plan of being carbon neutral by 2045. We have now completed our public consultation on how SFRS responds to unwanted fire alarm signals, and the collective feedback has been provided to our senior leadership team, and we should receive direction on the decision in early 2022. I would also, as police colleagues have mentioned, like to highlight a very successful joint initiative between East Renfrewshire Council, Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, Police Scotland, Scottish Water and Scottish Transport Police to address the high volumes of youths who were congregating at Picketlore Reservoir during the hot weather, which was within this reporting period, and has resulted in antisocial behaviour and damage to the reservoir inspection tower. I'm sure everyone here is aware of the terrible loss suffered in other areas to water-related incidents during this reporting period. And as such, in anticipation of potential water-related incidents during the spell of good weather within East Ren, we communicated collectively as partners and applied several preventative measures to minimise the opportunity of anyone being injured or worse in the open water sites across East Renfrewshire. Some of the actions implemented were drones deployed by police colleagues and an increase in patrols and presence. We had repairs carried out by Scottish Water to damage done by the youths at the inspection tower. The repairs to this tower was carried out within about 24 hours prior to the youths gathering again, and it made the area safe. SFRS ourselves, we created instant response plans, and we completed poster drops and familiarisation visits were carried out with the local crews and the community action team. The importance of the instant response plans were for launch sites for our boats and for our crews to gain access to these water sites in the event that we did have any events going on there. Also, East Renfrewshire Council created and coordinated social media messages and photo shoots and these were arranged involving all the partners, and this culminated in there being no instance of this type to report across SFRS. I'd like to record my thanks to all partners, in particular Chief Inspector Gray of Police Scotland for his continued support, and Rachel Forbes from East Renfrewshire Council for coordinating the comms piece, including the photo shoot and the media messages. Next, I would like to give you an overview of the activity carried out and the equipment supplied and fitted by our community action team during the Q2 period. So partnership community activities carried out by our community action team. We had 20, which included fire safety educational training to East Renfrewshire carers and care workers. We carried out a total of 201 home fire safety visits. Our high risk visits carried out within this period were 79. And during post-domestic incident responses, we carried out 61 and we gained at least one home fire safety visit from each of these. The home fire safety visits generated by post-domestic incident responses were 63, which gives us over 100% ratio. Our smoke detectors fitted during this period of time were 94 standalone smoke detectors, which was the type of smoke detector that we have previously fitted. However, we also supplied and fitted 88 link detection systems to high-risk addresses under the new legislation, which becomes compulsory in the new year. The other equipment that we've supplied were 12 standalone heat and 34 linked heat detectors, 19 carbon monoxide detectors, and 4 sets of fire retardant bedding. So thanks for that, Chair. I will now move on into the main body of the report. Firstly, we'll cover accidental dwelling fires. On the year-to-year indicator, we've had no increase in activity. However, we have noted a small increase on the 3-year average indicator, with cooking again being the main contributor and accounting for over 75% of activity. It's positive to note that detection was present in 94% of the premises, which confirms that the improvement of public awareness and the importance of the installation and maintenance of smoke detectors, which reflects the number of incidents which require no firefighting action and where there was no heat or smoke damage. To support reduction in this indicator, our operational crews have continued to carry out targeted leaflet drops in all areas which have had one or more accidental fires, and enhanced post-domestic incident response in areas of higher activity. This has been extremely effective in reducing demand within our localities, and it is encouraging to note that our current approach to targeted engagement is reflected within our low numbers across East Renfrewshire. Accidental dwelling fire casualties. I'm pleased to report that we've maintained our objective of 0 accidental dwelling fire casualties for the second consecutive annual period, as well as a 50% drop over the 3-year indicator. I would also like to point out that during Q2, our operational crews carried out 79 high-risk home fire safety visits, and it is encouraging to note that through our application of post-domestic incident response, they gained a minimum of 1 home fire safety visit at every incident that they attended. And this is what has resulted in the drop in this indicator. Moving on to unintentional harm, you'll note a significant increase in non-fire casualties, with the main contributor being road traffic collisions, which accounted for 57% of the activity, which equates to 8 casualties in total. Now, all of these casualties were involved in a single RTC, and to put some context around that, these can be minor injuries, these can be examinations by Scottish Ambulance Service colleagues, and these will still be recorded in our reporting system. So although the figures show higher there, they were minor casualties. All personnel involved, or all persons involved in this, had minor injuries. The other significant factor which contributed to the increase is through Scottish Fire and Rescue Service assisting partner agencies by affecting entry into premises. So, for example, assisting Scottish Ambulance Service to gain access to premises to deal with injured persons within. During this period, our crews and community action team carried out a total of 20 multi-agency engagement activities across East Renfrewshire, with a focus on road traffic collisions as well as unintentional harm and harm within the home. It is pleasing to note that during the extended period of good weather within Q2, we experienced no water-related incidents or casualties as aforementioned, and to achieve this, SFRS carried out familiarisation visits to all significant reservoirs and dams within East Renfrewshire and implemented response plans in preparation for any potential incident based on the information gathered from these. This was supported by East Renfrewshire Council, East Renfrewshire Police colleagues, Scottish Water, and radio and social media campaigns. We also had a successful social media campaign, Stay Alive and Get to Know the Fatal 5, highlighting the dangers of drink and drug driving, speeding, careless and inconsiderate driving, and using a handheld mobile phone. This campaign emphasises that these offences put your life at risk and the lives of other passengers, pedestrians and other road users. Moving on now to deliberate fire casualties and deliberate fire setting. There is a noted increase in deliberate fire setting over both the year-on-year and 3-year average indicators. The predominant cause of the rise is secondary fires consisting of grassland and refuse fires occurring during the school holidays and within the extended period of good weather. I can report, however, that there is only one primary fire, and it is pleasing to note that there are no vehicle fires. During this period, our community action team has continued to engage with the East Renfrewshire Young Persons Diversity Group to educate our young people on the consequences of fire-related antisocial behaviour. Our fire safety enforcement team is also continuing to engage with duty holders to remind them of their responsibilities and to remove any potential sources of ignition to remove the risk of fire across our local business. Our community action team are also continuing to fully engage with partners and public across Barrhead, Liboside and Uplow Moor, as well as Newton Mearns North and Neilson, which accounted for a high percentage of the deliberate fire setting over a short period of time within the school holidays and the long dry spell of weather. Our community action team, in partnership with community wardens and police, also carried out direct engagement with these areas to advise of the dangers involved and the negative impact deliberate fire setting has within our communities. Moving on now to non-domestic fire safety. It's pleasing to note that we have had no increase in non-domestic fires, with only 2 being recorded for both this period and for the same period last year, and a significant decrease in this type of incident against the 3-year indicator. The activity involved was one accidental fire in a care home where a light fitting had overheated, causing minimal damage, and one deliberate fire in a primary school where combustible materials were lit, causing significant damage to the roof. To reduce this activity, our crews continue to deliver advice on non-domestic fire safety and youth education on fire-related antisocial behaviour through our thematic action plans, which are targeted towards this type of activity. Also, we continue to carry out post-fire audits, which are carried out by our fire safety officers to address any deficiency found following an incident. And Chair, finally, unwanted fire alarm signals. There's been a significant climb in unwanted fire alarm signals across the area, with a 31% increase on the year-on-year indicator and a 3% increase on the 3-year indicator. It's disappointing to note that most of these incidents were avoidable and were caused by human error, with education and care premises being the top reporters. To reduce the impact of unwanted fire alarm signals across the localities, our Take 5 campaign is ongoing. The activity is still very much centred around individual addresses with single actuations, and the majority being in educational premises with faults or contaminants in the equipment being the main cause. Schools have now returned, and direct engagement between ourselves and the duty holders has taken place, and hopefully this will reduce the activity as we move forward. Certainly, having looked at it into the next quarter, I've seen a significant reduction. The positive side to this is that due to our current amended UFAS policy, when we receive confirmation from the call centre that this is a false alarm, only one appliance is sent to carry out the inspection. This reduces blue light journeys and the economic cost of this type of incident, and with our consultation on UFAS being completed, further measures to support reduction may be applied next year. Chair, this concludes my report. Thank you again for the opportunity to present, and I'm happy to take any questions from you or any of the members. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Group Commander, for that detailed report again. Councillor Grant.
Thank you, Chairman. Alan, can I just pick up on the deliberate fire business? Is it really because we had such a lot of dry weather that that kind of exacerbated the thinking of some people, oh, we'll just go and make a wee fire and it all gets out of hand? Do you think if we have a wet spring and summer again, as we usually do, the deliberate fire business will drop considerably?
Absolutely, Councillor Grant. Thank you for the question. Yeah, absolutely. The deliberate fire setting is very much based around the good weather. Schools are on holiday, children are out, and they tend to, set the grass on fire. and this is what creates an increase. It's very important, as said in my report, that we're continuing to engage with business holders as well, because during the COVID period, we had a build-up of refuse lying round about business premises, etc. And that, again, if children are out playing, can be a temptation to them. So we need to get that removed. But I also feel strongly, and we have certainly been doing it through our community action team, that it's not just about engaging with the children. And been previously working in Ayrshire, which had a huge area for wildland fires. It's very important that we engage with the parents as well, to let them know the importance of making sure they know where their children are and explaining the dangers involved in this, both to the public, to premises, to businesses and to the wildlife. And we're certainly, we work on that. But no, to answer your question, very much weather related. And if we get a wet spring into summer as we normally get, and you see the grass turning green very quickly, we'll certainly see the numbers coming down.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Alan. That was one of the questions I was going to ask, was about what advice you give to mitigate against these fires. I think you said, don't leave refuse lying about for businesses. Get that off the streets. And you know, we've seen some shocking pictures of what happened in other countries over the summer there. We might not be as vulnerable to that, but we still want to keep as much biodiversity as we can. And it's all part of the flip side of the climate change agenda. Another question, Alan, it was about the new regulations that are coming in 2022. It's almost upon us. What support can you give to communities, or what advice can you give? A lot of people haven't done anything about it yet. They're just worrying about it.
Yeah, absolutely. We've encountered this, Chair, across the board. We've had, you know, daily we have people on the phone asking how they can go about this. So there is full guidance on our website, and if in doubt, go into our website and book a home fire safety visit. Our personnel will come out, carry out a home fire safety visit, and for house owners, so owners of the premises, where they're deemed to be high risk, we will fit and supply the new link system. But we can also give advice on them for people who don't fall into that category. The information that we've received so far from local authorities, and area commander may have further information on this, I'm happy for him to come in. But the current information that we've been given is that for community linked alarms, so our telecare alarm systems, then that is an addition to the alarm system, the linked alarm system that's going to come in under legislation 2022. So it's really important that you get that visit. So if anybody's in doubt, have the visit. But the legislation will mean that any premises, you will require to have a smoke detector within the main area of living. You will also have it in open areas. So normally that'd be a escape route. So if that's upstairs, downstairs house, you would have a smoke detector in the hallway upstairs and one downstairs. You will also have a heat detector within the kitchen, and these will all have to be linked. So if one goes off, it's notifying you right through the whole house, whether it be the heat detector or whether it be the smoke detector. And also, if you have, for example, a gas boiler, a gas fire, we'd look to have a carbon monoxide detector in there as well. That won't be linked to the main system, but it is an addition to be put in the premises for safety. So that's the requirement, and that will come in for February 2022. I would anticipate, and this is only my own view on it, that as people start to renew their insurance for their household insurance next year, that there will be a pro forma or a tick box in there to say that you have had this fitted to your premises, and that will form part of your future insurance. So I would urge you to say, I would urge everybody to, you know, highlight that needs to be done. And also, if you feel that you're in that high risk category, that you get us out to carry out a visit and we can supply and fit them.
I just hope there's enough electricians to do it.
Well, the good thing is,
that is a good time.
The ones that we fit, Chair, are Bluetooth, so we don't even need to do it. We can program before we leave the station. We set them up and they talk to each other. So we run a test in the station before the crews go out to fit them, and that saves damaging, you know, any of the fabric of the house as well. But as you say, I think the other challenge will be, as we move forward, will be the supply of them. So just now, we currently we're absolutely fine with that. However, as we know, the movement of any kind of merchandise just now is restricted, and it may encounter problems as we move forward.
Okay. Thank you for that. And David wanted to come in.
Thanks, Chair. Just to add on to what Alan was saying there, I think it's important to reassure members of the public, if they have a working smoke detection system in their house just now, they're perfectly safe. This is an additional measure post-Grenfell. Scotland's always been at the forefront of safety legislation around buildings. I say that, and certainly in recent history, we are ahead of our UK counterparts in terms of sprinkler systems in public buildings, and this is an additional measure that was brought in post-Grenfell. We've also directed members of the Cabinet and members of the public towards the local care and repair service. We have provided some funding for them, as I know the local authority do. So for the individuals who might not hit our very high criteria when we go through our risk rating form, they can come in at the level that would be round about that or just below it and fit at either a zero cost or a reduced cost. So this is just an additional measure. The only caveat I would say about, and Alan had mentioned insurance there, the ABI have indicated that there's not an impact on people's house insurance for a requirement for this standard, so they'll still be insured. So in case anyone's worried, I know some of the early leafleting and communication that went out from some companies, I don't want to use the word scaremongering, but it certainly wasn't fully conversant with the truth, shall we say, in the sense that people's building insurance and home insurance would be affected if they weren't compliant with that system. That's not the case. So just to give people a bit of reassurance, this is an additional measure brought in, and as I say, also to give you comfort, if we come out to a house and find that somebody doesn't have the system, we'll not be coming back to the local authority and or others to say that it's not there. We will always leave members of the public with a working smoke alarm system. And you see the reflection in the report, 97% detection present, 0 fire casualties. That is a pleasing statistic and it speaks for itself. So yeah, we will always leave somebody with a working smoke detection system, but if they do fit our criteria, we will fit this at no cost. If that's not the case, then we will direct them to where they can get a reduced cost. In fact, Alan, I think we could maybe reach out to our partners in the local authority trading standards to see if we could maybe look at the trusted trader scheme or how we would best promote that. I think that would maybe be a conversation we can take off table.
Absolutely, yep.
Okay, thank you very much, David. Thank you very much for the expression, not fully conversant with the truth. I might use that sometimes. There's one word usually that sums that up, but anyway, thank you for that. Anybody with any other questions? Caroline.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, I don't actually have a question. I just wanted to take the opportunity to just thank my colleagues in the police and fire for their kind words. And I suppose just to highlight, you know, the talk about the special relationship between the United States of America and the UK. Well, you know, I don't think it's a patch on actually the special relationship we have here in ERC with the police and the fire, and it's been long-standing, long history over the last 25 years from we first sort of got together around the table, and I think we've come a long way in that time and built a lot of good partnership working and a good trusted relationship. When I think back to, you know, the little tiny room down in Givenwick Police Station, which had half a dozen CCTV cameras. Councillor Grant, to see you nodding, you remember it well.
I remember it well.
So what we now have is, you know, a sort of large purpose-built control room and a telecare call handling centre down in the depot with facilities for the police there. And just generally, just great partnership working throughout the years. And I think that was at its strongest over the last 2 years. They say that, you know, you'd really test the strength of a partnership when the chips are down. And certainly police and fire really worked so closely with us during the pandemic, both in terms of, you know, the joint planning and prioritising of resources and dealing with antisocial issues as they were arising, but also the humanitarian effort and our fire colleagues really sort of, you know, putting feet on the ground to get out and delivering medicines and food supplies around our residents. So hugely, it's really helped me do my job, that strong partnership, and highly valued the work with my colleagues, and thank you for you've been very easy to work with over the years, and I really appreciate your kind words this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. And what I'd like to say on behalf of Police and Fire Cabinet, thank you for the immense contribution you've made to the partnerships and the council, and all the very best in your retirement. Obviously, this is one of the things that Zoom isn't that great at, but we will have many opportunities, I hope, or further opportunities to say thank you in person before you ride off into the sunset, as it were. But I think if we could choose one example of the partnership work in which you've contributed so much to, it's surely the water safety that went on this year with everybody involved, all the partners involved in that. And it's always true that you never see the heartache that you miss, but without that, who knows what harm can come. So the partnership stuff is just absolutely immense, and you have nurtured and worked with that for several years, as you said, back from wee small rooms to Zoom. So thank you very much. And I think that concludes our meeting for today.
Okay.
Thank everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.